go over some information for all of our community members. I'm glad to see all of you here tonight. I'd ask that you hold your questions till the end. With our athletic council meeting tonight, we're going to have a little bit of business. We have to accept the minutes from the last meeting right after our presentation, maybe some brief discussion. Then we have a couple of people that signed up to talk, and we'll allow any questions and comments at that time. We're going to use the podium. If you wanted to come up to that, we'll have the microphone on for you for that time. For introductions of our athletic council, we have Mr. Willison on this end. We have Mr. Say, Mr. Beery, Mr. Van Tassel, and Mr. Best. I'm sure everybody knows everybody here at the table today. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get started, and we're going to talk about the potential co-op that we're looking at with AC Valley and Union School Districts. So how we got here was pretty simply this. Over the summer, we spent a lot of time looking for a co-op opportunity for our soccer program. We were unable to find a suitable co-op opportunity for our soccer program. We met with parents. They were kind of relieved that we didn't go with the one that we found, but co-op opportunities can be hard to find based on some of the PIAA regulations that we have to follow. When we looked at how we got here, we were looking at some other sports that numbers were really concerning, particularly baseball, and football even is coming to some concerning numbers at this time. So what you can see up here now is schools that already have co-ops. They're in red, and they're around us. So it's AC Valley and Union co-op together. Cranberry has some co-op agreements with Oil City. North Clarion, Clarion, and CL all have some co-op agreements between themselves, and North Clarion had one recently with Forest. And then Red Bank, which is on one of our contiguous borders. One of the important things to understand about co-ops is we can't just go out and find any school. We actually have to have a contiguous border, or actually border that school to be eligible. Or we can border a school that has a co-op with another neighboring school, and that's a possibility for a co-op as well. So if you want to go ahead and move to the next slide. In order to have everybody eligible for playoffs, for district playoffs and so forth, PIAA only accepts co-ops in a 2-year cycle. So this is the upcoming 2-year cycle beginning next year. Typically, PIAA requires co-op agreements to be in place by October 1st, and this year they extended it because they actually changed how they're counting numbers for classifications. So with PIAA, it is an interesting process. You first have to get school boards to agree to a co-op. They have to actually formally accept the co-ops. Then it goes to the District 9 committee. From that point, if they accept it, it goes to the PIAA board, and then the PIAA board has to accept the co-op. Again, that happens within 2-year cycles. If you go outside of that 2-year cycle, you can still join co-ops. However, if you change the classification of the school, for instance, if you go from single A to double A, what their punishment per se is that you're not eligible for the district playoffs in that sport. If you go into a co-op with schools that don't change the classifications, typically they accept those, and then you're still able to do playoffs. In our case, when you look at most of the schools around us, in certain sports, we would definitely change the classifications with those other schools. So the next thing too we were looking at is we wanted to really look at our population. And we were thinking about our school population. You'll see that, as well as the population in Clarion County. Over the years, obviously Clarion County population has shrunk. And that really mirrors what our school is going through as well. The other thing about the Clarion County population is there's an older group that tend to make up the biggest growing portion of the county. Unfortunately, I don't want to give away my age, but I fit into that group as well, moving up into the area. But that's actually one of the things with Clarion County that we've looked at is, even in the future, do we have the students that are going to be moving into the county? I kind of touched on this with my last comments. The biggest growing group is the group 50 to 64 that's moving in, and the biggest declining group is the group that's 35 to 49. Obviously, in typical families, most of your students that are school age come from those groups that are in that 35 to 49 age range. You can take a look too at our Keystone enrollment chart, and it basically starts from 12th grade working to kindergarten. And you can see we have classes that are all over the place, especially in the elementary levels where we have classes below 60 right now, which would equate to classes graduating less than 60 in the future. This is the actual Keystone enrollment. So I looked at 20 years ago. That was the latest records that we had in our district office. You can see that at that point we had in the elementary school 639 students, 557 in the high school, for a total enrollment of 1196. Each year then, and I kind of went to the even years, 2010, 2020, you can see an overall total decline. And then in November 2023, which is this year, you can see that we're down to 855 students. The other important thing to look at is the elementary enrollment. It's 421 compared to the high school of 434. So that even brings up the next issue is we're still declining. So as those numbers from elementary move into the high school levels, we're going to have less full class sizes, replacing larger class sizes in the high school, which will continue to mean an overall decline in enrollment. Our 20-year change, we are minus 341 students in 20 years. And it kind of looks like 2 based on the enrollment for our elementary school compared to our high school. We're kind of on pace to be the same moving forward. So Athletic Council has some criteria that we look at for shuttering programs. This year, we essentially shuttered the soccer program. So we didn't have, we look at, do we have enough numbers to safely compete in the sport? Do we have enough to feel reasonably confident we won't have to forfeit any games? And do we have enough numbers to show the program is sustainable? Sustainability is kind of the key, is do we have all those programs or enough numbers to say, yes, that program is going to be continuing, it's going to be strong, we're going to have enough people to compete safely and be able to not get hurt out on any type of playing surface. So this year with the one that was shuttered, we actually didn't meet any of those criteria. We didn't have enough students to even field a team to begin with. So then Athletic Council has the tough decision once we've shuttered a program is how do we bring it back? And it comes back to many of the same questions. Do we have enough to safely compete? Are we confident that with those numbers that we have, we won't have to forfeit any games? And we do run into some league issues when you forfeit games and don't complete the schedule that's set out. Do we have enough numbers for sustainability? And that's kind of a tough one again, is do we have the numbers coming up to replace what we have and what we need to be able to compete? And one of the other issues is it makes it very difficult to get people interested to compete in a sport if we stop it and start it. So stopping and starting makes a really difficult time to get students to be able to compete. So coming up, we're going to have some athletics numbers breakdown, but before we do that, Coach Smith is here from the football team, and he's going to be discussing some of the football information that he has. And really what that does is that also goes into some of the criteria that Athletic Council uses, because we do take coach recommendations into consideration.
Good evening. I was asked by Mr. Hall and by Jason Say to speak tonight. I was kind of avoiding this during the season because, we were focused on still playing football and, trying to get into the playoffs when we were in the playoffs. And so at the end of the season, I sat down and really took a good look at our numbers and what they would look like for next season. First of all, next year's returning players, grades 10 through 12, there'll be 18 players on the team that will be coming back next year in those grades. That would be 10 skill players and 8 linemen. Of the 10 skill players, I would consider 9 to be varsity ready players. And when I say varsity ready, I'm not talking about talent or skill, I'm just talking about bodies that can be on a varsity field against 17 and 18-year-olds. Of the 8 linemen, I would consider 6 of them to be possible varsity-ready players. And when I say possible, those 6 players would still have some work to do in the off-season to get themselves ready to play. Just to put that in perspective, it took us 8 linemen to get through this year, and that was with 7 seniors and 1 sophomore. That leaves 3 for the JV team. Of that 3, I would consider 2 to be JV ready. Next year's upcoming 9th graders, talking with Coach Bufano, he believes that 10 players would move up from this year's junior high team. With 2 players from varsity and 10 moving up, that would be 12 players for the JV team next year. That's before injuries, ineligibility, sickness, etc. Seniors and or varsity starters cannot play in JV games. It is my belief that there would not be a JV team next season. Next year's varsity team, we would have at most 15 varsity ready players. That's including 6 linemen, and we need at least 5. You can't count on 9th graders to be varsity ready. I know this year we had 3 that ended up starting for us, but that is not normal. Over my coaching career, I've not had many 9th graders that are ready. The Region 2 schedule is a grind. Extremely difficult. Even Kane this year, who was 0-10, was a very physical football team. And we can talk about why we're in Region 2 and we're not in Region 3 with some of the schools that have some of the same things that we're going through, but we're in Region 2, and it's pretty tough. You can't put players in a varsity game that aren't physically ready. Football is different than any other sport. I think it would be very difficult to make it through the season next year. Forfeiting varsity football games is not a situation that we want to be in. And I've been in that situation before in 2006 when I was the head football coach at Clarion Limestone, and we actually did forfeit 2 games that season. My opinion on the co-op is that the numbers don't lie. The co-op would be the best answer for football, for all players to be able to play games and compete at the appropriate level. My opinion is only based on numbers. I understand that logistics also play a big part in the equation. This is separate from my feelings. I don't want things to change. When I got hired, I said I wanted to coach 10 to 12 more years and finish my career here. I am essentially firing myself by supporting the co-op. There are no guarantees I would be involved. I am in a great situation here at Keystone. I love my players, and I tell them that all the time.
Thank you. And what I would reiterate too is that really, when we look at this, we'd all like to keep things. None of us really like to do a lot of change. It's not something that we look forward to doing. We try to do what's working and trying to do what's best for the students. So we just went over the football players' numbers, I think, with Coach Smith's presentation. So the next few slides do have a lot of numbers. We have baseball player numbers, where right now we have 20 players total that have signed up. Unfortunately, who signs up, who shows that interest at the beginning, usually aren't the ones that come out and play, not all of them. In many cases, we could be between 50 and 60% of the total of who signed up coming out to play. With baseball, we've come up with numbers that would show us around 11 students. Where we run into a lot of difficulty here is we do live in Pennsylvania, where we have some weather problems trying to get the games in, and when you get to the point where you're trying to fit in 2-3 games, maybe even a fourth one in a week, you just run out of pitching arms. It's unfortunate, but baseball does have that pitch count rule. It's something we can't get around as well. So the next one is soccer. We didn't have a season this year for soccer. I believe we had, Mr. Best, was it 8 players? Yeah, 8 or 9, and we need 11 to field a team. Coming up for next year, I believe we have 6 to 7 players that we would have coming out. So obviously that program, we shuttered it this year. We want to try to get those kids an opportunity, and we haven't had that yet. Soccer girls, the last I knew were pretty strong. We do have some numbers. They're a very young team. They're up and coming, but we do have some pretty decent numbers with soccer girls. These slides too, I'm going to make sure that I post those on the website underneath the co-op information so that you can see those later as well. Girls basketball, we have about 15 girls, in talking to the coach that will be playing this year. It makes for a nice squad. The downside to just 15 is it doesn't really give you a good varsity JV mix, a good balance. Usually you like to have around 20 for that. However, that doesn't mean that we can't run with 15 girls. We can certainly do that. It's not one of the ones that we saw as a critical level. Cross country, we had 9 total underclassmen returning. The neat thing about cross country is you usually run 7. I think everybody can run in the meet. You have 7 that basically make up your varsity squad, and then 5 score at the meets. So technically, you could get away with 5 if you needed to. Does it make it healthy? Maybe not. You need to have some extra runners and things like that. But those cross country numbers are not terrible on the boys' side. In junior high, though, we only have 2, I believe, coming up. So that's where we really have that difficulty is, do we have a sustainable program with students coming up for cross country? The cross country girls numbers are not quite as good as the boys. So I believe we had 4 students that would be running girls cross country. And Mr. Best, is that what we ended with this year?
I think so.
4. So obviously in 4 you don't have enough to make up the entire scoring for the meet. So we were a little under there. The other thing too is we only have 3 girls in the junior high program coming up. So again, looking for sustainability. Do we have those girls that are coming and willing to be in cross country? Basketball and boys basketball, this is an area we weren't looking to co-op. We have very strong numbers. I believe there's 23 out there now. In fact, I just saw them in practice earlier tonight. There's a nice amount. They're a pretty healthy amount at this time. Girls softball, we have 22 players signed up, but I know that we don't have that many that we were expecting to play. Again, with girls softball, what we have is a nice amount for a varsity squad only. We haven't been able to do any JV softball, so that's something that we want to continue to look at is can we get JV softball to give girls a chance to gain experience before they move up to that varsity level. Volleyball, again, we had good numbers with our volleyball team. It wasn't an area we were looking to co-op. We had a lot of kids involved at the junior high level and at the varsity level. So those were not areas that we were looking to co-op at this time. And the next part's some financial information that came from our business office. Mr. Willison, I may ask you for some support in this part of it, but we wanted to look at a few sports really to get us started, see what it looked like. One of the important things too is it's much easier when you look from a financial standpoint to be co-oping with one set of schools as opposed to somebody going to Union, somebody trying to go to Clarion, somebody trying to go to Oil City, those kinds of things. So when we looked at these numbers, and again, these are projections. We haven't really done this program yet, so we had to do some projections based on what we expended this year, what we would expect based on what we think are worst case scenarios for next year. And when you look, there were a couple sports that came out as savings. So varsity and JV football, we would actually have a savings from what we expended this year of a little over $2,000. Varsity boys soccer, we didn't run it this year, so we didn't have any expenditure this year. It would actually be an added expense of about $6,000. Varsity girls soccer, that was another program that we were looking at as a potential co-op. I know we have some decent numbers there. Our savings will be over $3,000 for that. Varsity baseball, we actually came up to savings of $99 at this juncture, which isn't a lot of savings, but it's nice not to be in that expenditure place. And then we looked at the corresponding junior high sports for those. In junior high football, if we were to co-op, it would be $980 as expenditures. In junior high co-ed soccer, it would be about $1,300 in expenditures. And junior high baseball would be almost $4,000 in expenditures. Many of those junior high football we offer, junior high co-ed soccer we offer, junior high baseball we do not currently offer. But if we were able to get something like junior high baseball set up, that would help us with sustainability, with getting students into playing, continuing from the youth leagues into junior high and moving up to varsity. These sports, the varsity sports, were identified by Athletic Council as the most critical. And I included girls soccer in that just to get a comparison with boys. The most critical that we saw were varsity football, varsity soccer, and varsity baseball. So now we're looking at our options, and that's really why we had these meetings, these discussions, these opportunities to hear from you, and surveys that we put out. So let's say that we proceed with the co-op and with limited options. Positives, stability, it does give us the ability to continue with sports that we may struggle with. Soccer we've already struggled with. Baseball could be a real struggle even this year. Football, as we heard from Coach Smith, would be a real struggle for next year. We want to continue with the opportunities for student athletes. So as opposed to having to shutter anything, we want to keep those opportunities going. We want them in place, and we want those students to have something that they look forward to doing. And from the surveys, most of them really play the sport because they really enjoy it. Sustainability, we need at this point in some places some additional support, especially soccer and maybe baseball and football here soon, to be able to field the teams. And that's important again to give those kids those opportunities. And this one, we want to create a model where we have a say in the student's future. When you saw that first slide about people going through co-ops and so forth, a lot of places may take us here in the future, but would we have any say in the identity, have any say in the coaches, or anything like that? And that's really up in the air. In many of the cases, sure, they'll take our kids, but we don't get really any say in it if we don't have something we're kind of in the forefront helping to set up. And we want to make sure that we don't have ourselves left as the school that has no options. If, for whatever reason, some of the things that are out there are Red Bank looking at Union for potential co-ops. If they were to do that, what options would that leave us? And that's just something that we wanted to think about as we're working through this process. Negatives, it's really moving fast. And I'll be honest with you, that wasn't the intent of the Athletic Council when we said that to look into the possibility of co-ops. It's really moving fast. You saw as an overall there were probably some slight cost increases. It was refreshing to see that there might be some decreases with the shared opportunities, but the potential for cost increases is definitely there as well. Increased competition for student athletes at the varsity level, and what we mean by that is there's going to be more student athletes competing for the same spots on the regular team at the varsity level. Travel time would definitely be something that would be of concern, and again, why do you want to find something that's closer rather than farther away, like the opportunity we had for soccer that we tried to pursue earlier this year. So we could reject moving forward with the co-op as well. So positives, gives us a chance to slow down, look for future opportunities. Everything stays the same at this point, which is a positive, that it doesn't have any changes. The downside could be, when is it that we have to shutter more programs? So those are really the positives that we could think of. And the negatives, in order to be eligible for playoffs, if we change classifications, we wouldn't be able to do this co-op for another 3 years. It'd be 2026 season before we could do that. We would still be at risk with some of the numbers that you heard, some of the numbers that you saw, of shuttering even more programs. The potential for no options to co-op with other schools certainly could exist at that point, especially if schools have kind of gone with schools that are close to them to make sure that their programs stay sustainable. If we were shuttering programs, that would be decreased opportunities for our students. And again, in looking at that map, everybody around us with the contiguous border has a co-op already. We would be that one odd person out. And that's not really what we were hoping to look at, but unfortunately, it's just a reality of where we're at. Some common questions that we've had from the first meeting, and maybe some of the ones that would go on today. What does the host school mean, and how will athletic decisions be made? So the host school, in typical thought process, would be the one that houses the sport. But that's actually not the case. So PIAA in a co-op makes everybody find a host school. So you have to identify one host school. That host school would actually be responsible for the administrative duties of paying officials, gathering up the game workers, making sure that coaches got paid, but all those main decisions would still come from the joint committee. So coaches wouldn't be hired without input from each of the schools and the school boards. The decisions made for part of the scheduling would come from the league and then back to the individual schools. So all those kinds of things we would still have a say in. We just wouldn't have the administrative duties that go along with it. What happens to the boosters? Well, in some cases, booster clubs merge with those other boosters. Basically what that means is that any of the money that the booster clubs have generated, that follows the kids in the program to wherever it needs to go. If, for example, we do soccer as a co-op, the soccer boosters, the boys soccer boosters, would go with the soccer players. They would merge in with the other soccer booster club and become part of, however their program goes with the officers and so forth. And the same goes with all the booster clubs. One of the big differences would be KMA. KMA has a lot of things that they raise money for, so none of those things would be able to be touched by the other booster clubs. The only thing really in a band co-op like this would be the kids playing at halftime of the football games. There's no other changes. All of our concerts are musical, even going to the parades and things like that don't change. That's still KMA, that's still the Keystone band. And I kind of just talked about band just now. So cheerleading is kind of the same thing as far as sideline cheer. Competition cheer was not something that we were looking at co-oping at this time. That is the PIAA sport, is the competition cheer. The sideline cheer, again, our cheerleaders would be able to go, they'd be performing with the teams, and really is if nothing was different other than potentially having girls from the other schools that they'd all be cheering with. Transportation would be the thing that we're looking at, sending the buses out with students, having them lay over, bringing them back here at the end of practice. One of the things that was a big concern of ours is we don't want to take kids from here after school, take them, drop them off somewhere, and that's it. We want to get them back here so that they have an option to be able to get home with parents. Parents know where they're going to be and no issues like that. Transportation is probably the largest cost, bar none. Would you say that, Mr. Willison? Yes. So where we get some of the savings in would be our cost sharing with coaches, salaries, and those kinds of things. If baseball is having trouble fielding a team this season, could they potentially co-op now instead of waiting until 2024? The answer is yes. So what that would mean is for this year, that team, because they would be bumped up a classification, wouldn't be eligible for playoffs. However, the reward to that would be having those kids having that chance to play, having them continue to be able to work out in baseball, get better in their skills, and be even more ready for the future. It would also, too, some of the seniors that might be ending their careers maybe have a chance to still get a scholarship, maybe they have some opportunities like that, would still have that opportunity to be able to play this year. So that is a possibility. And I have to say that's a possibility at this moment because we asked the other schools, would you do that? Because they have to agree as well. They have to agree and decide that they would not go into playoffs and be part of what we would be doing. So really that's the short answer is yes, if baseball's in trouble this year, they can do that. Keep in mind that in all these cases, and especially with Keystone, you have to get a recommendation from the athletic council that goes to the full board. The full board has to approve it, then it goes to the District 9 committee, then it goes to PIAA. So there are some of those other steps that have to be done, and we can never guarantee what District 9 or what PIAA would do, but the short answer for baseball is that is a possibility yet this year. And I think that brings us to the end of our slideshow. So with that, I do know we have to do a little bit of business here with our agenda, and then we have a couple of people that will call up that wanted to speak tonight, and then we'll open up to other questions. So Mr. Best, you're going to get the lights.